Once an island of internal stability in a region teeming with wars and democratic close shaves, Tanzania has lost its innocence. An election preceded by a tense run-up, complete with a ban of the main opposition party and detention of its leader, ended in predictable fashion: chaos. The number of deaths remains unknown, with estimates ranging between 500 and 800, and maybe, just maybe, above that. Against that backdrop, President Samia Suluhu Hassan has been sworn in as president for the next 5 years. So where does Tanzania go from here? We assess the situation there. Back home, the search for unity in the united opposition continues, and the upcoming by-elections is being seen as the unity's litmus test. We assess the union in United. On Jamila's memo tonight, you are on your own. A memo to Kenyans living outside the borders of Kenya. Bonyo picks a bone with the education CS Migoso Gamba over his reluctant war with ghosts. Sam Sense is directed at the Gen Zs and the millennials. Do they know what the older political classes are cooking? On Kai Kai's Kicker, the power of darkness in African elections, the case of Kenya and Tanzania. And on My Take, the trinity of terror among founding members of the East African community. That's Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. The gang is here.
Mimi Samia Suluhu Hassan naapa kwamba nitakuwa mwaminifu kwa Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania na kuitumikia kwa moyo wangu wote, na kwamba nitaihifadhi, nitailinda na kuitetea Katiba ya Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania kwa mujibu wa sheria iliyowekwa. Ewe Mwenyezi Mungu nisaidie.
The hashtag is NewsGang at Citizen TV Kenya. And we also look forward to your text messages. The number is 22422. Welcome to the program. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, a lot has happened in Tanzania, it would seem, in just about a week or so. From the 29th of October, when the election was done, to Monday this week, that was what, the 4th or the 3rd of November?
3rd of November.
When President Samia Suluhu Hassan was sworn in. Quite a bit that's taken place. I'd like us to begin with the swearing-in process, which we understand took place at the Chamwino State House in Dodoma. Jamila, let's begin with you, naturally, kwa Waswahili.
Kuna matatizo kwa jirani. Yvonne, and I remember we talked about this last week when we discussed the elections on 29th, and we were asking our analysts who were here about whether what was seen had been expected in any way. And they said yes, because all the signs had been there, starting from the opposition, not like the strong opposition, were being allowed to be part of the process. But then now the elections happened, and we also how it was on that day, the chaos, the violence that was witnessed, and the fact that there was no internet was shut down, there was no power. And I remember even for us covering the elections in Tanzania was a huge challenge. From day one, we were unable to even get footage, official footage, about what was going on. And in fact, journalists that we know from there were unable to communicate. We are getting in touch with them now that the internet in the country is back. But then now, with all the chaos that was seen, the violence that was seen, and the videos that we are seeing, and even in our border points, what we saw, there were results that were announced by the Tanzanian Electoral Commission, announcing that Dr. Suluhu Hassan had won the vote with 31 million, over 31 million votes out of a possible 34 million, over 97% of the vote. And even when we look back at that, and we look back at some of the images we're seeing from Tanzania, up to footage of ballot boxes being gotten out of the polling station, ballot papers being cut into pieces, some places being set on fire, you wonder where these results came from. What was counted to get them to 31 point something million votes? Number one. Number two, Yvonne, and we were talking about this when we were discussing the show, is we never really did see much footage of voting or counting of votes from there. the day before the internet was shut off, we didn't see much footage of any voting or counting of votes. There was very little, other than President Samia Suluhu and maybe a few here and there, because we were consumed by what else was going on, which was the violence. And then you have results being announced. Over 97% of the votes. Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan is sworn in. And there's this whole event that was done, as you said, in Dodoma, in the State House there, with the full military honors, with prayers, and with the speeches. But then now, Yvonne, I don't know if I should make this comparison. That ceremony, although done mchana peupe, kind of reminds me of the swearing in of President Mwai Kibaki after the 2007-2008 elections. Because, okay, let's compare it with other swearing-ins that we have seen. The recent one was at Nyayo Stadium, mchana peupe. Thousands of people there, wakishangilia, wakisikiza, even others that we had seen after the 2002 elections. Yeah, 2013, 2017, 18, yeah, 2022. Even theirs, previous ones that were not marred by any of this, were more public, more people, who were there. But then this one was just totally, totally different.
Right.
But you see, some gave us pretty good, not a history, gave us a lot of information about what Tanzanian law says about matokeo ya uchaguzi. You cannot go to court contest. Mtu akishatangaza ameshinda na tume ya uchaguzi ni hivyo. That's it. Mambo yameishia hapo. And these are some of the things that brought the problems in the first place among the opposition, including Tundu Lissu, who said no reforms, no elections. Even up to the point where how is the Electoral Commission in Tanzania appointed? How are the members appointed? So all these things come together, and then we have a swearing in and warnings are issued. I don't know if, Roba, we can listen to this soundbite, 1.2 of President Samia Suluhu thanking her 17 competitors.
Katika uchaguzi huu, tulikuwa wagombea 17 kutoka vyama mbalimbali vya siasa nchini, tukiwania nafasi ya urais wa Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania. Napenda kuwashukuru sana wenzangu 16 ambao kwa hakika wameonyesha ukomavu wa kidemokrasia kwa kuendesha kampeni ambazo tulishindana kwa hoja na sote tulionyesha kuwa siasa sio vita. Tumemaliza vyema uchaguzi na kumpongeza aliyeshinda.
I have a question on that. So she had 17 competitors who all together took collectively 2%
of the vote.
Of the vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, asilimia mbili tu.
Okay.
Because here is assuming that, I'm sorry I don't have the numbers, maybe Sam will give us at some point, the total number of registered voters were what, the 34 point something million. So asilimia 100 watu walichokeza kupiga kura. Everything else notwithstanding that we saw. The violence, the chaos, the everything. Wale wengine waligawana.
So if you even did it in absolute numbers, if 17 candidates share 2% of the vote, means some of them even got hundreds, right?
Yeah.
It's massively popular.
We actually haven't seen the results.
Yeah, we have not seen the official breakdown.
Yeah, for the others. Yeah, for the other. Yeah.
We only know of the winner.
Yeah, so I find that interesting. Also the mood there, with 31 million people who voted for you. It seemed like such a somber, there was a somber mood, you know, at this swearing-in ceremony, which would be unlike a celebration of 31 million people who resoundingly said, this is the person that we want to. You know, the mood seemed rather awkward for somebody who's been overwhelmingly voted in by 31 million people. But there was also the idea of projecting her as a stoic leader. I don't know if you noticed, they kept, you know, TBC, that's the Tanzanian Broadcasting Corporation, kept going back to this image of her standing there with the wind blowing her scarf, and she had this stoic look, and it was just a constant projection of her as president. You know, we keep saying around this table that communication is not just in what is said, but it's, you know, in what is seen. But it was, I don't know, that was what struck me from that swearing-in ceremony.
I looked, and even the attendees, I know we were represented by our deputy president there, but again, I keep comparing it to previous swearing-in. Yeah, not even ours.
It was nothing joyful, it was nothing jubilant.
Yeah, but yeah, that was it, it's been done. So she's the president of Tanzania, at least for the next 5 years. What happens beyond this now is, I think, what people need to see, because there's no way you can sweep under the rug or under the carpet what has happened. Because you talk about how in your intro, Yvonne, that could have been almost 800 people who have died. Yeah, and 800 people. So that is massive. That's a lot. And you cannot just continue as normal with something like that, because there were, she spoke about what happened in Tanzania, and Roba, I'm going to request again, if we can listen to her talking about kilichotokea sio Tanzania at the swearing in.
Wote tunaitakia mema nchi hii, tumesikitishwa na kuhuzunishwa na matukio ya uvunjifu wa amani, upotevu wa maisha na uharibifu wa mali za umma na mali za watu binafsi kwenye baadhi ya maeneo hapa nchini, hasa kwenye majiji na miji. Kilichotokea hakiendani na taswira na sifa za Kitanzania na sio Utanzania. Haikutushangaza kuona kuwa baadhi ya vijana waliokamatwa kutokana na kadhia hiyo wametoka nje ya Tanzania. Vyombo vyetu vya ulinzi na usalama vinaendelea kufuatilia na kuchunguza kwa undani zaidi kilichotokea na kuirudisha nchi katika hali tuliyoizoea kwa haraka.
I don't know, listen to that whole thing where she says, haikushangaza kuona kwa baadhi ya vijana waliokamatwa kutoka na kadhia hiyo wametoka nje ya Tanzania. In my opinion, it's almost like in denial that actually this happened, what happened in Tanzania was by Tanzanians themselves who are angry about how things were going, how the elections were being conducted, how this whole process, democratic process that is supposed to be the voice of the people, is being done. So there needs to be an acceptance that this happened and that we need to do something about it. Remember, they kept saying no reforms, no election, no reforms, no elections. Kenya.
So who are those?
Who are those? Exactly. Kama siwa Tanzania. Because who would benefit if there were changes in Tanzanian laws about elections? 2007, 2008 happened in Kenya. We lost lives. And then reforms came. But no one wants to go through that route where you have to see violence and people dying for changes to come. Again, as I said, this cannot be swept under the rug. We saw the statement by SADC observers. We saw the statement by the AU about how those elections were. And it cannot just end like this.
Indeed. Yeah. And I want us to take a look at, maybe Sam, you can take us through what those election observer reports said. There was the African Union one, which was, I think, by far, the most comprehensive and perhaps the most stinging. There was the one by SADC. There was the letter that was written by the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, that was written to the president. And what I found interesting about the letter from the Mo Ibrahim Foundation was it was a letter directly to President Samia Suluhu Hassan herself, as opposed to the others that were reports about, the state of the election and how that was conducted. But Sam, those reports were pretty damning.
Oh yes, and you see, because of the blackout that was, whether it's the internet shutdown or the inability to even access what the Tanzanian media was saying about the election, you are left to now trust those that were there. What are they saying? President Suluhu has said there are a few elements that are interfering with the election process. Some of them not even being Tanzanians from outside of that country. But also, the other sources are now these observer missions. If you have to look at the one from the African Union, they are talking about how the mission was able to observe that there was actually ballot stuffing at several polling stations where voters were issued multiple ballots to vote, compromising the election integrity. They talk about the situation that not all people that appear to vote were carrying the identification documents that would identify them as voters. There's also a question about people that only voted for the presidential vote, not in the other parliamentary or councillor elections. So clearly, it paints to you that particular picture you're talking about, because if you're saying that Samia Suluhu got that 1.5 million votes in an election that the opposition was not participating, if you talk about the mainstream opposition, one of the parties being Chadema, compare that to 5 years ago when Pombe Magufuli was the presidential candidate and Samia Suluhu the running mate.
What were the votes? The
vote that Pombe Magufuli got was 12.5 million votes. Ooh. Tundu Lissu got 1.98 million votes. That's an election that both the opposition and the government party were taking part in. A few years later, 5 years later, you jump from 12.5 million to 31.5 million votes for Samia Suluhu. That's a jump of about 19 million votes. I mean, How does that happen? Because ideally, when you have an entire wing of the opposition barred from participating in an election, and it's across all the elections, you have the person who would have been the presidential flag bearer in prison throughout the pre-election phase up until the election date and post. Then how do you say that the participation in the election is way higher? I know the motto, if you look at the coat of arms of Tanzania, the rallying call is Uhuru na Umoja. Uhuru in English is freedom. Yeah. Umoja is unity. Freedom and unity. Well, maybe there's unity because of the number of votes that you find declared there. But as far as freedom, we don't see it much. If you're to talk about even what the reports are able to observe, in as far as the shutdown, the access, and people getting an opportunity to vote in a free manner, because the violence doesn't help when it comes to those particular elections. But then again, back to the Constitution, I think one of the things that the Chama cha Mapinduzi party has done is to strictly follow the Constitution, because you recall that when he said that Article 41(7) says that you cannot contest the results, no court would have any jurisdiction. Indeed, that has not happened. Now, guess what Article 42 says of the Constitution of Tanzania, sub-Article 1? The president-elect shall assume office of president as soon as possible after it is declared that he has been elected president. And I'm reading what is written. He, not she. He has been elected president. But in any event, he shall assume office before the expiration of not more than 7 days. So a strict adherence to the constitutional framework that has been laid down. But I think in the end, what this comes to, because you have to look at the reports of AU and SADC themselves, they're saying that it does not comply with treaties that Tanzania is a member of. In fact, when they reflect on the Constitution of Tanzania, it says, no, you cannot have an election where there's no checks and balances in a judicial process. So they are appealing to them, especially the report by SADC, that come together, hear the people, let them make their submissions on what they want to see with the Constitution of Tanzania. Sort of, do you reform it? Do you change it altogether? So there's a conversation that Tanzania must have. So yes, the elections are over, maybe not behind them. I don't know what that means. But they may be over, but there's a serious question of transparency in the democratic processes that Tanzania claims to undertake, that they must fix, whether they like it or not. Because if you're looking at the images that we saw, we have not seen Tanzania in such a situation. Even if there is claim that citizens from different countries were joining the demonstrations in Tanzania in the different provinces. And when you speak to journalists in that country, they tell you it's not just Dodoma and Arusha and Dar es Salaam. It was across different parts of the country, different provinces. So they have so much work to do to ensure that you hear the people, make the processes democratic, make that country democratic, because where we are headed, at times that you're finding people born in Uganda becoming mayors in New York City, you cannot have people born and raised in Tanzania not able to take part in decision-making
of their own country. And when we talk about, you know, those reports by the various observer groups, remember the SADC observers said there was in how they were treated, how their phones and passports were confiscated for a while before being returned, and they were subjected to what they called aggressive interrogation tactics, forced to even delete some of the footage. But this is what President Samia Suluhu Hassan is saying. In fact, in her inauguration speech, she did address those reports by the various observer groups. Let's listen.
Makundi yote ya waangalizi yameshatoa taarifa za awali na tunawashukuru kwa kuwa nasi, na kwa heshima kubwa tumepokea maoni yao. Hata hivyo, kama alivyowahi kusema Rais wa awamu ya 3 ya Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania hayati Benjamin William Mkapa mwaka 2000 wakati akiapishwa kuwa rais, na hapa nanukuu kipande tu cha hotuba hiyo kinachosema: na washukuru watazamaji wa kimataifa kuja kushuhudia uchaguzi wetu ulivyofanyika. Walipotusifu tumepokea sifa hizo kwa unyenyekevu mkubwa. Tumesikia pia waliodhani hayakwenda sawa, na mengine hata sisi wenyewe tumeyaona. Maagizo ya kutuelekeza nini cha kufanya tumeyakataa. Ushauri wao tutauzingatia ili tufanye vizuri zaidi siku zijazo. Mwisho wa kunukuu.
Maagizo yao tumeyakataa.
Ushauri tumeusikia.
So do with it
Yvonne,
what you want.
You see, there's no election when you don't have genuine competitors. It's a coronation. And right from when Tanzania announced election dates, it was all designed for Samia Suluhu to become the ultimate winner of that challenge. And all the actions by the National Election Committee, by the state security systems, and everybody in government was designed to give her a win. So I really didn't see the need for all this that we have seen happening in Tanzania in the recent days. But like we have read the reports by the Observer Mission, if you look at what SADC has indicated, if you look at what AU has indicated, I don't know which observer group will give it credibility. It totally lacks legitimacy. And by the way, at this point we must ask the EAC Observer Mission led by the former Ugandan Vice President, Dr. Kazibwe, and deputized by Maina Karobia, where their report is. Because if SADC has done a report, if AU has done a report, then EAC also owes us a report. It is important to note that some of the things, some of the handling of these observer missions were not in line with international democratic best practices. And therefore it tells you the environment was already polluted. And therefore the credibility of this election was in question from day one. We said here last week that this is an opportunity for Tanzania to rewrite its political culture. If Samia Suluhu truly heeds, in as much as she says tumewasikia, na the other Kiswahili words must be very difficult. I'll not attempt to paraphrase. But she's basically telling them what you guys said, got in with the left, exited with the right. And therefore, she is stamping her authority. But what we must also ask is, as a member of SADC, then SADC must take action. Because they are saying this election was not credible. AU must take action because AU is saying this election was credible. But the most unfortunate thing is that amongst the first people to congratulate Samia Suluhu was the chairperson of AUC and the chairperson of EAC. This sends a very, very wrong message, especially to young Tanzanians who are hoping that there would be people who will help them stand up and hear their voices. For
the sake of the viewers, do you want to say the names of those chairpersons?
Well, it's on record.
No, you know, it's interesting when you talk about the people who would have wanted to hear something, you know, from them. I just want us to listen to President Samia Suluhu once again, because she did speak to the people ambao anasema walizua vurugu. Hichi Kiswahili cha Kitanzania. There's a reason they think ours is diluted. Let's listen to the president there.
Tumie fursa hii kutoa onyo kama mama, kutoa onyo kwa wale wote waliochochea uvunjifu wa amani. Na nawataka watambue kuwa vurugu na uvunjifu wa amani huishia kupimana nguvu na uwezo wa kujihami, ila mazungumzo huzaa mshikamano. Sasa tuchague lenye manufaa kwetu, kwani usalama wa taifa lolote hulindwa na wote kwa nguvu zote na gharama zozote.
Indeed, munapewa onyo kama mama. You know, there's that warning that your mother gives you that you know that look.
Bus.
Yes, and you know mukifika nyumbani kutakuwa, kutakuwa na, let me not use that word. But you see, this is an interesting tone that you see coming out at what is supposed to be a victory celebration, a parade and a show of, we've done it, now let's consolidate ourselves and let's move forward, and this is the agenda we have for the nation. I mean, far be it from me or from us to tell them how to do things and how to conduct their, activities and programs, but this is what I was talking about, the mood that was set there. But there was also some interesting things in terms of who was there and who wasn't. Like we said in the beginning, President William Ruto sent his deputy, Professor Kithure Kindiki, and there were a couple of other leaders there. And perhaps what some of them said might have been interesting. Let's listen to President Hichilema. By the way, how many presidents, before we listen to that, attended? Full presidents? There weren't too many. There was a president of Somalia, right? Yes. And then Mozambique.
There was Burundi.
And yes, okay. All right. And you could tell the message was also being drummed in as well by some of them. I want us to listen to President Hichilema on how he handled losing elections himself.
I led our party of those 23 years, 15 years. I lost many elections. I had the motivation to go in the streets when we felt that we did not get treated properly during elections. I was always the first one to say, no one goes in the streets. No one. Those who supported us genuinely complained, particularly 2 elections, that I took the responsibility and the leadership that I cannot send my men and women, citizens of Zambia, in the streets to damage property, to kill somebody, because that blood will be on my hands.
Messaging.
Indeed, and President Hakainde Hichilema, who has admirable credentials as a fighter for democratic space, obviously misses the point when it comes to the context of the Tanzanian situation. Things did not just happen on election day or after. There has been a very clear build-up to where the country got to, because for the first time and in a very long time, you have the main opposition party banned from participating in the election. This was the party that was number 2 in the last election, the previous election, and performed quite well in the past 2 elections. So it also means there are a lot of people out there, supporters, who do not have a choice come October. So it didn't just happen that people poured to the streets. And then the main opposition leader, Tundu Lissu, was in jail, is actually in detention. So there are all these circumstances that I think Hakainde Hichilema, either from the moment, just chose to forget about and address things that happened on election day. But when I tried to look at how long this journey has taken, and I think it's the legendary General Electric CEO Jack Welch said, change before you have to.
Yeah.
Change before you have to. And I think that's the lesson that Tanzania is going on today. And I'll say that with reference to our own story as Kenya. Our change before you have to happened between the 2nd and 5th of December 1991, when President Daniel Arap Moi at the Moi International Sports Center, Kasarani, told delegates that were heading in another direction that, look, we have to remove Section 2A of the Constitution that prevents the creation of other political parties. Let's open the political space and have more parties. President Moi and his KANU party actually had the physical ability to continue holding on for even another 10 years, violently and through other means. But those are not sustainable methods of running a country. And he went against the voices of the delegates and led the party in amending Section 2A to reintroduce multi-party politics, because you already had many activists, you had a lot of leaders that were emerging outside that frame. So, did Tanzania miss its December 1991 moment? I think that is what afflicts Tanzanian politics today. And it does in two ways: in the broad sense of the national politics, but in the more consequential sense of the Chama Mapinduzi, the ruling party. Something that has to be said about CCM, founded back in, and I think as some of you really efficiently explained last week about the history of Chama Mapinduzi, starting off in 1977 as a party that brings together TANU, Tanzania African National Union, and the Afro-Shirazi party of Zanzibar. They got together, and you look at their history, and CCM, its history, and CCM has been a party that has been so strongly grounded in ideology. Leaders did not just happen in CCM. They were nurtured, they were taken through a very long process. I had the benefit of attending and covering, as a reporter, the 2005 party nominations, CCM nominations in Dodoma. This was the transition from President Benjamin Mkapa to President Jakaya Kikwete. And I saw firsthand how it works with the CCM. It's a thorough process. First of all, delegates gather there in Dodoma for about a week. And different days are slotted for different things. What I remember is the strength of the Central Committee of Chama Mapinduzi. Very, very strong body that was in charge of vetting candidates. And one thing has to be said about that process. It was actually a credible process. They ask very pertinent questions about a candidate, ethical issues. If you have any corruption scandal, then there is a problem. But of course there is politics, in the sense that the views of the founding father, who was still alive at the time, who had died by then, still continued to guide the party. And in 2005, when I was covering the nominations in Dodoma, the person over whose head the late Julius Nyerere's word hung over was one of the most politically experienced persons, John Malechela, who was a former prime minister. But apparently, in the late Nyerere's view, he thought this guy is prone to corruption. And so word was, don't let him. So how did the CCM Central Committee do it? I remember Malechela appeared, and they asked him to, that you are an old man. They told him you're old, and your duty now is to advise younger party members. So the battle went down to the wire, and I remember the race was between Jakaya Kikwete, who was Foreign Affairs Minister at the time, and Dr. Hamid Salim, who was the OAU Secretary at the time. There were other two candidates, Mark Mondosia, who was Minister of Energy. Then there was former Prime Minister, sorry, I think it's former Speaker, Frederick Sumaye, quite a senior figure as well. But the race was Kikwete's to lose. And I remember it went into several rounds. Now, I'm referring to this story because of the openness of that process. There is politics, there are those interests that have been taken care of, including knocking off some candidates who, in the bigger picture of CCM, should not be allowed to proceed. But it was a tidy cremation process. It's not untidy. I'm painting that because there were so many candidates that used to vie for political position. And I remember Jakaya Kikwete's speech that day. Remember, Jakaya Kikwete pushed Benjamin Mkapa 10 years earlier to the wire in the I think, 1995 nominations. And so he stood there and said, this time, kura zimetosha. And indeed, the votes were enough for him to be nominated. I give this story because the deep traditions of open competitive politics within CCM, Chama cha Mapinduzi, have been dying gradually, so slowly. And if you try and, I'm sure there'll be conflicting views on when it started. In my own view, it started with after the term of President Jakaya Kikwete. And in the Jakaya Kikwete succession, there was Edward Lowassa, who was a prime minister, who was Kikwete's prime minister. And so just by rank, you have built quite some base. He was very popular. So he goes to Dodoma, but Dodoma CCM Chama, the Central Committee has different ideas. And again, Lowassa suffers the John Malechela's curse. I think somebody brought a petition that, you know, he had been dismissed because of some energy scandal. And so he can't be nominee for president. But he was popular, and you could see because the National Delegates Conference is made of thousands of delegates. So even the way they would cheer, you can tell where the numbers are. But of course, the system is in such a way that I think the last three names go to the delegates. So Lowassa goes to the finals with John Pombe Magufuli, who was Minister for Roads, and he is defeated, and he says that was unfair, and decamps 3 months to the election. So he does what Kenyans did in 2002, and he tried to go do a change moment. And he had this coalition. He went for Chadema, but then there was a coalition for reforms. I think the short name for that was UKAWA, Umoja wa Katiba, and yeah, something to do with constitutional changes. So this alliance was the version of the National Rainbow Coalition. And indeed, they ran a very energetic campaign. It looked like Lowassa was actually potentially able to win.
It was called UKAWA, Umoja wa Katiba ya Wananchi.
Umoja wa Katiba ya Wananchi. That's right. So UKAWA was a very, very strong coalition, and it looked like it was going to end for the first time the stranglehold of CCM. And the win was narrow, 7 million to 5 million. Lowassa had 5 million, and John Pombe Magufuli had 7 million. I call it narrow because 31 million versus 200,000 is quite a gap. And so again, it was not a happy election, because what is happening all this time? What is happening all this time is new generations of voters are coming into the voting space. Younger people are coming into the political scene, but CCM is not changing how it's doing its things. Fast forward that to the rematch between Lowassa and Magufuli. Again, it was a very, very nasty affair. That ends up in a handshake somehow, just to cool things down. So at the time that Magufuli died in March 2021, he had made peace with Lowassa. But then here is something else that maybe CCM never prepared for, and that is a constitutional transition arising from the death of a sitting head of state. It's not something easy. Our own situation in 1978 was very tricky, because it was even preceded by campaigns that maybe the vice president should not succeed the president when he dies. You know, there was a change, the constitution movement led by Kihika, Kimani and others. They wanted to change, so to prevent Moi from succeeding. Now, within CCM itself, was there a change in the constitution movement? No, there wasn't. what happened was, after the constitutional succession, immediately when Mama Suluhu Hassan came to office, there was a split between her new team and those who were considered the Magufuli loyalists, who believed in a strong center and all that. Here is the contradiction that we must really confront tonight. The contradiction of Mama Suluhu Samia Hassan, because what was her initial demeanor when she came to office? She looked like someone that was going to reach out to everyone. Let's remember that Tundu Lissu was out in exile.
Yes,
when,
that's right.
When Samia Suluhu Hassan became president.
Yeah.
And she was conciliatory. She wanted to build a different political environment. And that is how Tundu Lissu went back to Tanzania. Yeah. So that the same Suluhu who brought Tundu Lissu back home is the same Suluhu that then sends him to prison and prevents him from running for election. Yeah. Is really an oxymoron here. Yeah. And it's something that is surprising, a surprising twist. But I'll try and explain my own theory of what happens there. CCM and the Tanzanian government is run from the center. It has a strong bureaucracy, arising obviously from the nature of CCM, which is almost, you can compare it to the Communist Party of China. Yeah. You can also, if you want to be soft, it can be compared to the ANC, African National Congress in South Africa. Mm-hmm. But it's more China than South Africa, because ideologues control the thinking and guide political direction. And I think that is where the central bureaucracy that includes the security services. We should all remember the intrigues that surrounded the handover to Samia Suluhu Hassan when Magufuli died. You remember the rumors that there are sections that are not happy, so the military has decided this way and that way. Half it, take 50% of that to be untrue, but take 50% to also reflect some of the realities that go on there. The strong security bureaucracy in Tanzania is very, very involved in decision making, which is why we'll always find this difference between the soft motherly voice of Samia Suluhu Hassan and what actually happens in Tanzania, because she sounds, she doesn't sound like what we are seeing, basically. Yes. So it's because behind that also is a very powerful, strong center that directs the security operations in Tanzania, and you can see this was not an election. To call this an election is to lie, and I think we in the media cannot do that. That was not an election.
It was a
coronation.
And an untidy one, done again by, I'm sure, the security services. That, you do this, there'll be an election. How many people do we have registered? 37 million, can 32 million vote immediately? And allocate some 200,000 to
17 other people.
And I say this not in condemning Tanzania. We do these things, even here in Kenya. Only that you make sure, do it on a scale that Kibaki used to call a bit intelligent. The threshold is 50 plus 1 in our case. So don't do
90 plus 1.
Don't do 90 plus 1. But again, I try to say that, and again, there comes an election that we had in October 2017.
Oh, yes.
That had 90, was it 98%?
98%.
Yes.
Suluhu is trailing.
Just
suddenly. So in terms of pointing fingers, nobody in the region can. We used to point fingers, but the last time we should have pointed fingers in 2000 and to the rest of the time.
No.
Can you just be a bit tidy about it? Like, don't lock up your main opposition. So what I was saying in summary is change is catching up with CCM. And CCM is not managing change. And if CCM doesn't manage change, change will manage CCM.
For them. Yeah, true. Absolutely. Let's take a break. When we come back, we have more on the program. This is NewsGang.